Hello, friends. My co-host Melanie and I are going to discuss if Biden should be replaced. Let's get into it.
They're wondering whether he should stay in the race. However, no prominent elected Democrats have said that he should drop out just yet. And one historian who has predicted 9 out of 10 presidential elections says replacing the president could cost Democrats in November. With us now is Alan Lichtman, presidential historian and history professor at American University. Professor, when we last heard from you Friday night with Abby Phillip, you said no, replacing President Biden would be a mistake. You've had 2 more days to think about it. How do you feel this morning?
Even more strongly that it would be a mistake. You know, all of those who are calling for Biden's withdrawal, they have zero track record in predicting elections. And yet they presume to tell us what the Democrats need to do to win this election. And remember, all the pundits, watched Hillary Clinton win 3 debates in 2016. They all said Trump was finished after Access Hollywood, and they are so often wrong. I have a system, as you know, that's been successful. I would say 10 of 10, but we can argue about 2000 since 1984. And the way it works, I have 13 keys. If 6 fall against the White House party, they're predicted losers. Biden ticks off the incumbency key, and he ticks off the party contest key. You push him out, you lose the incumbency key, and you lose the contest key. So instead of starting 2 keys up and having 6 more keys to fall to predict the Democrats' defeat, they start 2 keys down, and only 4 more keys would have to fall. Moreover, how often since the turn of the 20th century has the party holding the White House ever won in an open seat with an uncertain or contested nomination? The answer is never. And that's what all these critics would be setting up if they push Biden out of this race. They could not be more misguided. And in terms of Biden's capacities, I'm not a neurologist. They're not neurologists. They have no standing to comment on that. And I would only say far better to judge Biden by 3 3/4 years or so of his presidency than 90 minutes.
Alan, but
Well, Ron, we've been hearing a lot of chatter about President Biden's age and approval ratings. Some party members are suggesting the Dems might need to consider a different candidate for the ticket. What are your thoughts on this?
It's a sensitive topic, Melanie. President Biden has been a dedicated public servant for decades, and he's accomplished quite a bit during his term. But I understand the concerns. His age is a factor that many voters are considering.
Exactly. I respect President Biden's service, but I'm worried about our chances in the general election. The polls I've seen suggest the Dems might be vulnerable.
You're right to be concerned. However, replacing an incumbent president is not a decision to be made lightly. It could be seen as a sign of party disunity and might alienate Biden's supporters. It's a delicate balance, Melanie. We need to weigh the potential benefits against the risks. Who did you have in mind as a potential replacement?
I see your point, but shouldn't we prioritize winning the election? If there's a candidate who has a better chance of defeating Trump, shouldn't the Dems consider that option? Well, what about Vice President Harris? She's younger, has executive experience, and could energize different demographics.
Harris is certainly a strong leader, but she also faces some challenges in terms of approval ratings. We'd need to consider how she'd fare in key swing states.
That's fair. Are there any other names being floated around in party circles?
There's been some talk about Governor Newsom from California. He's got executive experience and has shown he can win in a large, diverse state. Both are intriguing options, but we have to remember that any change would need to be handled very carefully. We can't afford to appear divided or disloyal to President Biden.
Interesting. I've also heard some buzz. It's about Secretary Buttigieg. He's young, articulate, and has that Midwest appeal. I agree that unity is crucial. But don't you think that having an open and honest conversation about our best path forward is important for the party's future?
Absolutely, Melanie. These conversations are necessary, but they need to happen behind closed doors with the full involvement of President Biden and his team.
And that's what all these critics would be setting up if they push Biden out of this race. They could not be more misguided. And in terms of Biden's capacities, I'm not a neurologist. They're not neurologists. They have no standing to comment on that. And I would only say far better to judge Biden by 3 3/4 years or so of his presidency than 90 minutes.
Alan, but people are talking about this, the voters, the people who are going to be making these decisions. And you look at some of the polling, and it says 72% of the voters, after they watched that debate, said they didn't think that he had the mental acuity to be the president. Do you pay attention to those polls? How much does polling play a role in how you see things?
Polling plays far too much of a role in our decision making. Polls are snapshots. They're not predictors, and they change rapidly over time. One can turn to another poll. I think it was the Morning Consult poll, which showed that after the debate, Biden improved by 1 point. He went from a dead heat to a 45 to 44% victory. And, I love you guys in the media, but I have to say you are complicit in Donald Trump lying and conning his way to the presidency. All the attention has been on Biden's faltering debate, but Donald Trump's debate was vastly worse. It was based entirely on lies, more than 30 significant lies. That's one lie for about every 1 minute and 20 and 30 seconds. He threatened our democracy by saying he wouldn't accept necessarily the results of a fair election. He said he would seek retribution. Why wasn't that the headlines? Why wasn't that the greatest concern from the debate, rather than all the focus on Joe Biden? There's an old saying, it's not just the evil people who wreak havoc on the world. It's the good people who don't do enough to stop them. And the media right now is complicit in Donald Trump gaslighting his way to the presidency and threatening our democracy.
Professor, I've been a big fan of your model for decades. I think the model is terrific. And so I'm not asking any questions about the model itself and how President Biden fits or doesn't fit into that model. My question to you is, when you talk about they have been questioning whether President Biden should stay in the race. Have you talked to voters since Thursday night? What's the discussion been around you with people who may not be in politics since the debate Thursday night? Has the discussion among voters, and I'm curious to know, have they talked about Donald Trump and the lies he told, which we did report on, or have they talked about how President Biden looked on that stage Thursday night?
I've gotten a slew of emails ever since my CNN appearance, as you say, on Late Night last week, which, by the way, has gotten about 500,000 views already on YouTube. And, some have said you're wrong, Biden's got to remove. But the vast majority of communications to me have said, thank you. Thank you for highlighting the importance of keeping Biden in this race, and that the real danger is not Biden faltering in a debate, but Donald Trump lying his way into the presidency and threatening our democracy. That's been the great bulk of communications I've gotten. Totally non-scientific, of course. Don't draw any conclusions from that, but the American people who seem to be aware of the very serious stakes that are involved in another term for Donald Trump.